I'll just say this, okay? The Flyers right now could skate naked onto the ice, just buck naked onto the ice, and not get mentioned in sports talk in Philadelphia right now. I mean, there's absolutely nothing. This city is insane right now with
LaShawn McCoy.
JD McCoy. It's insane. It's absolutely. I mean, there is nothing. Like literally, I'm driving. I was driving. Sorry for late show today. I had family stuff I had to take care of this morning, and I'm driving along, and you know, usually I listen to XM, you know, hockey a lot when I'm driving, but I gotta listen to local sports talk because this is such an insane situation that's going to hurt. So I'm listening to it, and you know, they had Brad Lidge was coming on. He's a pitcher for the Phillies, you know, like ex-Phillies pitcher, I guess, you know, and you know, and because spring training's going, you know, the Phillies tied the Yankees yesterday, you know, whatever. I love how they can tie in baseball in preseason. Anyway, so they tied them 5-5. So you know, Brad Lidge is coming on the next hour, but we promise it's only going to be for a very short period of time, and it's only going to be to talk about the Phillies just for a little bit. Then we'll get right back to hearing. People couldn't take the fact that Brad Lidge could possibly talk about the Phillies. That's how far off the Flyers are from getting any interest right now in this.
Well, I mean, all the Buffalo radio talk the last few days was the deadline, and you know they played the Sabres played Tampa last night. So for about 5 minutes they mentioned the positive fact that they lost to Tampa, but ever since 6 o'clock yesterday, it was the LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso trade. And the thing is, in Buffalo, and of course I go against, everybody is going nuts. They think, oh, this is great. You know, Rex Ryan has got his,
right,
you know, 1,000-yard running back, you know, the ground and pound and all this stuff. And I'm like, he's 26. He's been injured a bunch of times, and they just gave up a linebacker who was phenomenal as a rookie and hurt his knee in his second year. And I think it's a terrible trade for the Bills, but I'm in the minority. But of course,
oh man, you should be on Philly Talk Radio then, because they could use you, because this is an angry city right now. I mean, this is like Shady McCoy is like a hero here. I mean, this is like
I have him in a keeper NFL league, and he is remarkably productive.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, his consistency is just remarkable.
They compare him to Barry Sanders here, you know, like, and I mean. Yeah. I mean, that might be a little bit.
He's not quite that good. You know, to quote a famous politician, you know, I know Barry Sanders and he's no Barry Sanders.
Yeah, well, this is what I'll say.
We have a Lloyd Benson quote here on the HockeyBuzzCast.
And to tie this all into hockey for a second, and I think this is the last show I'm going to do that on this set. I'm not sure. I miss my cozy office. But I feel like I'm on display here too much. Like,
by the way, put me down as someone who I like this.
You like this set better?
No, it looks very professional, and you know, I like it. So
all right, I'll give it the whole week. I'm going to give it the whole week, and I will try my best to because I don't know. At times, you know. Anyway,
well, you can haul it out.
I'll keep it here for like special occasions. My thought would be like this would be like a special report, Hockey Buzz special report. This would be like the news desk, you know. I'll have Julie here just 24/7. She'll just be sitting here waiting for things to happen.
That doesn't sound like a bad thing.
Yeah, keeping Julie in my basement 24. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so.
Not saying anything.
Twitter's gonna blow up now.
No.
Oh, good.
What we're talking about. She knows.
Well, can we mention the weird happenings in Sunrise, Florida last night?
Yeah, we will. But because I want to say this. This is the one thing I want to talk about this football trade for a second in terms of hockey, because we just went through a trade deadline in hockey, right? Hockey is the wimpiest sport in the world. I mean, as far as the GMs go, the GMs in all the other three sports, baseball, basketball, football, are willing to make trades like this. You will never see a trade like this in hockey. It's just. Why is this, Kevin? I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, for one thing, though, when you trade NFL players, there's not the longevity. If you make a player, make a trade like this with the ages of these players, you would expect those players to be on your roster for another 10 years.
Right.
In the NFL, when you make this trade, you expect them to have them on another 18 months. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but you know, the career expectancy is just so different. And you know, there's non-guaranteed salaries, which also makes a difference. It's easy to just move guys out, and I also think the culture is different. Like the NFL's fans are trained to understand that trades get made because of financial reasons and, you know, clearing cap space, and it's just much more accepted. Like you don't, and the NFL fans don't blame teams for mismanaging the cap, or not very often. Let's put it that way. I know Russ brought up a point that the Jets fans were unhappy, but for the most part, you hear fans saying, like, when they got to trade a star, or they can't say, well, what are they going to do? They got cap. That's just what they say. You never hear that in the NHL. I just think that the importance of players, they're just almost, with few exceptions. I mean, obviously Brady and Manning and dominant linebackers, but few exceptions, players are much more interchangeable in the NFL.
Yeah, and very, very rarely are there, in the NHL, it's we refer to them as hockey deals, player-for-player deals. Very rarely in the NFL is there football deals, player-for-player deals, and this was a player-for-player deal, and players who are in their prime, or even before their prime. Alonso he played 1 year and then had the injured second year, and it might be because the Bills are changing their defensive structure or whatever. All I know is that in Buffalo, Alonso was very popular, and they thought he was going to be back this year and make a difference to an already good defense. And now they have McCoy, who don't get me wrong, he's one of the best running backs in the league. It's just a question of whether, I believe he's 26 years old, and he's had some injuries in the past, whether he is going to be, just a short-term solution for 2 or 3 years, and was that worth giving up a young player like Alonso? We'll see.
He's 26.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's old. Mike's point is well taken. You don't see player-for-player trades very often, and usually when you move out a star, it's for a second and a sixth and a
that kind of thing. That's true.
I
don't know. Chip Kelly is a gutsy move, and I'm not a real football fan, so I don't feel like I could actually talk on this with any authority at all. Right. Not that I can talk about hockey with any authority either, but I just think that I definitely can't talk about football because I don't watch. I watch football very casually, but I'm always amazed because when trades happen, of course, your ears perk up, and I'm just amazed how we see these baseball trades. There's monumental baseball trades. This football trade in hockey, the Tyler Myers trade was the biggest trade that we're going to see. That's the biggest kind of trade we'll see. Which is a relatively big trade for hockey, a bunch of players going back and forth, but.
Well, we used to see those big trades. I mean, you look at the history, of the game. It's the salary cap has changed things. There's no doubt with regard to trades, and I know fans hate hearing that in media saying, well, it's hard to make a trade because of the money, trying to get the money to line up. But it does cause difficulty. In the old days, you'd see those dramatic trades like. When I was a young man, the Buffalo and Detroit made a big trade with, Danny Guerin, Dale McCord, and Foligno going back, and we've had the Mahavliches, we've traded. I mean, there's been huge trades. Wayne Gretzky was traded in for God's sake. So, Terry Spacek,
The Doug Gilmour deal was a 10-player deal. I mean,
yeah. We used to have them all the time. It's just much more difficult. We still have them. We just don't have as many because it's much.
I'm trying to think of the equivalent though of what this would be like, in scale on hockey. This is like,
Well, this is Danny Heatley from Marion Hossa.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. I mean, they're both accomplished players, and one's a little bit younger, different positions. I guess it would be more of a defenseman for a forward type trade.
Yeah.
Probably. Trying to think if there is something.
Well, I was going to say something like if you're talking about comparably aged players, say an Oliver Ekman-Larsson for Joe Pavelski deal, something like that. A good defenseman for. I mean, although I don't know if Alonso could be compared to Ekman-Larsson because I think Ekman-Larsson is more established at his position than Alonso is as a linebacker in the NFL. But I mean.
Yeah, the oddity of the NFL, though, is the career expectancy per position is so different. Like, quarterbacks and linemen can last a long time.
Right.
But running backs are not going to, they're probably the short. I mean, I don't know this for sure. I remember reading during the contract friction that the running back had the shortest career expectancy. I believe it was just over 4 years. But but linemen last for a long time.
And the funny thing is that the Bills have the oldest running back in the NFL in Fred Jackson, and he is 34 years old.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's someone in the chat room said that this is like the equivalent of the Shanahan-Stevens trade, like that kind of trade.
Yeah. That's a better one. I like that. That's a real good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best one. I love it when the fans. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
they nailed it. I mean,
Yeah, defense forward. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's about right. That does make sense. I agree. All right, so we do have a quick look. Actually, we have a sponsor trait, crazy or not. And I know I haven't even told you guys this yet because it's really not. We're not getting any money for it. But we got a.
Wait a minute. We have a sponsor, but
well, no, but we got a device sent to try out, and it's this thing. Okay. So this is and we are going to be able to give away one of these at some point. I was told. So because we're trying it out, but this is called the Amazon Echo. You guys heard about this? So this is it's a really cool device, and you can ask it hockey scores, which is why I thought I would bring it on the show and show you how it works. Because it's basically it has a name, and her name is Alexa. So if I say Alexa, you see it lights up. All right, so say Alexa, and then you say, what was the score of the game last night? That kind of thing. So I'll try, I can do it with the Leafs, for example. Alexa, what was the score of the Leafs game last night?
Last night, Toronto Maple Leafs beat Florida Panthers 3-2, and they will play this Monday at 6:30 p.m. at home against New York Islanders.
There you go. So
it's basically like a Surrey, except without the phone.
Well, yeah, and it's awesome actually. You can just say, I can say what kind of music would you like? Give me a band. Give me a band.
Genesis.
They hired the same person that used to be on my TomTom GPS unit to do the voice.
This is the clearest voice of any computerized voice I've ever heard. If you who's a band that you like, Kevin?
Who's a band? A band that I
musician.
Oh, musician. I don't know. It's a tough call. Let's see. What do I like? You mean we're talking old time band or?
Yeah, like something I could play. Something I could have her play. Something I could have her play. Who's that guy you always see? The piano guy. I'm sorry.
Ben Folds. I go.
Yeah.
Ben Folds.
So I could say, Alexa, play Ben Folds. Thank you. Alexa, play Ben Folds.
Alexa and left us.
Shuffling Ben Folds from Prime Music.
So you see, then she just start shuffling. You can just say, this knob on top here. This knob on top is the volume thing. Like, Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. Anyway, that's Alexa. Other parts, and Amazon, I'm working on them trying to actually give us a couple bucks for this, but right now they gave me this thing, and it's you can only get it now. I don't think you can get it without invitations or something like that, so it really makes no sense to advertise it. But anyway, that's all I'll say for now. Okay, so moving on. Let's move on to the show. Yeah, so that's all right. I'll ask it. Johnny, I'll ask the question. Alexa, where is Dion Phaneuf going to get traded to?
I wasn't able to understand the question I heard.
Obviously doesn't get it. Alexa, are the Maple Leafs in trouble?
No, a maple is not a leaf.
That is the best answer for that question I have ever heard in my life. That by far, I could write a column on that.
That was perfect. Wow, you see, we finally got our female co-host we've been looking for.
No, I'm not saying a thing.
She's not as but what's really funny about this is that it really looks like I really wanted to do a fun YouTube video. What's the difference between this and like a pile of hockey pucks? They're exactly the same size. I mean, if I had
what it looks like is the old canisters that they used to keep the long lenses in for the single reflex cameras. So
that's exactly it. And you can ask it. I mean, you can. And the cool thing is the music thing. And just telling it to play you anything at all time. You can just say, Alexa, play something. Alexa, stop. Anyway, all right, there you have it. So that's Alexa. Anyway, we'll move on. But we are talking to Amazon about sponsorship. So I like this thing. I think it could be we get one of these questions in the show, like when did the Red Wings last win this or what, we can ask her, and we'll see what happens. Let's start the show. D, I like that. I can't. D wants me to ask you if it's important to have a good backup goalie in your playoff drive. I promise not to talk about that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've lost that argument many times.
I won it. It needs googly eyes. I agree. That would be hilarious. I will put googly eyes on this
Actually,
tomorrow.
I thought about that argument last night, and I'm not that I'm siding with you, but I don't know how either Mike or I could argue with the idea that it is always better to have a better player than you have.
Right. That's exactly. Yes.
I mean, if you believe that Noivu is that much better than Hutton, it's obviously, I can't argue that. I think what we're arguing is it's just not worth all the hoops that must be jumped through in order to accomplish that, because ultimately it's not going to change your fortune.
No.
That's my point. My point is, like, you could get the best backup goaltender in the world, but it's not going to make a difference if you lose a Pekka Rinne or a Carey Price. I mean, Tokarski played well last year in the playoffs, and they lost. So, I mean, I don't think Tokarski was at fault for the Montreal Canadiens.
Not Tokarski. I don't want to go down this treadmill.
Let's just start the show.
Let's start the show, yeah.
This rat hole, yeah. Because I know I'm right. I got to say this one thing. All right, I got to say this one thing. This is the deal. The Predators, okay, are a team that's not always going to have this kind of a window wide open. We're not talking about a team that's like every other team in the NHL. Excuse me, Alexa. We're not talking about a team that's like every other team in the NHL. We're talking about the Nashville Predators. This team, has never won a Stanley Cup. They've never really. I mean, this is the second time in their history they've been this good. There was a year when they were this good when they got Forsberg, and they are the top of the league. I mean, they've lost 4 games in a row, and maybe Laviolette's burned them out. We don't know, but they're the top team in the league right now. And this is the kind of window that just doesn't stay open forever for a team like this.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't go out and spend huge money on free agents. They have a real opportunity here, and to not insure against this is baffling to me. That's my whole thing, and I think that among all teams,
Predators fans, burn your incense, get your rosary beads, and pray that Pekka Rinne does not get hurt.
That's what I hate about this whole thing. Everyone keeps ripping me. Oh, why? And Carter Hutton has tweeted me. What's wrong with me? I'm like, I don't have anything against Carter Hutton at all.
Yeah, but you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You can't say that he should, that they should replace him and then say, but
no, I can.
I still love you.
My argument has been this is unfair to Carter Hutton.
You're trash, but I still love you.
It's unfair to Carter Hutton at this point in his career to throw that kind of pressure on top of him. That's all. Anyway, starting the show right now.
Wednesday, March 4th.
What is it?
Wednesday, March 4th.
It's not Friday, and they don't need no food.
It's the only day of the year that's a sentence. All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, March 4th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast where we come to you Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. or today 1:30 p.m., but usually 1 p.m. to discuss the goings-on in hockey. And we have a couple of things to talk about last night before we get into our topic today, which will be the teams that won the war at the trade deadline. This will be kind of the last trade deadline show that we do, sort of, to a degree, probably, maybe, no promises. But we're going to talk today. We have a couple of things that happened last night, a couple of crazy games last night and stuff like that I did want to mention, and the ESPN thing as well. But yeah, so let's start with ESPN because that's the story I wrote about this morning to start with. ESPN now officially has won. We knew this was coming. This was been rumored before. We talked about it even before, I think. But they've won the rights to the World Cup of Hockey, and this is like you had 2 friends that were really good. They were really good together. They dated all through high school, and they had a horrible breakup 10 years ago, and now they're dating again. Type feeling to me. This is like 10 years ago, things went really sour with ESPN and the NHL, and now they're actually working together again. Which I
think it's more like not they're dating; they're going out for coffee.
They're going out for coffee. Okay.
Yeah, because they're not dating because they're still steady with NBC.
Yeah, is this mainly because NBC had other things to do? That's what it feels like. It feels like NBC had other things, like they had the Paralympics, they had the Ryder Cup. I heard a bunch of things that were going on. But it's what I'll say. This is the thing. ESPN is the biggest network on cable television. They are giant and they're big, and they are the most popular network on cable. By far, more people watch ESPN than any other single cable channel out there. And so it is. I mean, it is kind of good. I think it's good for the NHL to be there in this situation. I think it's a good. The NBC people are the same people that would see this. There are going to be some new people that see this. It's not going to be like the Olympics new people that see it, but it's going to be something along those lines, and maybe gives the players. And the NHL's ultimate goal, which I think is to get away from the Olympics, maybe this is a little bit of hype to that. This is okay. You're on ESPN. That's a good thing. This is a little bit bigger than normal. Mike, your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, isn't NBC coming right off of the? If it had gone to NBC, aren't they coming right off the Olympics in Brazil, and it would be right after that? I mean,
right, and that's why they have the Paralympics at that point.
Yeah, I believe it's scheduled for late August.
It's directly after the Olympics, which is a smart, which you said before, is a smart move by the NHL.
Right, and there is a little bit of a continuity here with ESPN because they host the World Cup for soccer. So getting the World Cup for hockey actually makes sense. I mean, I don't think this means the NHL and ESPN are walking hand in hand down the street because until ESPN actually puts a hockey highlight in the first half hour of their Sports Center, I still think there's some animosity there. And you have to go to their website and look at the video on their website under the game to actually get the video highlights of a game. I very rarely see highlights of a hockey game unless it's a bench clearing brawl or something that's perceived as a negative for the NHL on SportsCenter. And to that point, I've stopped watching SportsCenter and watched NHL Network because I can get the hockey highlights right there.
Kevin?
Yeah, this brings up to me just the memories of the one big topic of discussion that it turned out that I was wrong on. And I wrote a column. It actually was a well-received column early in the process where I basically said the NHL needed to stick with ESPN despite all the issues. Like, ESPN never treated the NHL with overwhelming respect. We all know that you don't see the highlights. When you do see a highlight, it's a fight. And this was going on even when they had the games on ESPN.
Right.
But at the time, it did not feel as if they had any opportunity to get to any of the major networks and get treated with any respect. Like, even on Fox, you had a Sunday afternoon game and then occasionally some playoff games, and it just wasn't working out. Where ESPN at least had a full slate. But the problem was, even on ESPN, you never knew when they were going to be on. They had no scheduled day. They had the NHL Tonight, and it used to be on. Even that didn't have a time, and it was always a mess. You never had any what was happening on ESPN. Obviously, I liked all those guys. Steve Levy is a terrific hockey guy, and
Gary Thorne and Bill Clement were a great duo.
For sure. Thorne was a terrific hockey guy. I mean, there was a lot to like about it, and I just said my position was, even though it's a bad. There's a lot of fighting goes on with this relationship. It was really the best one that the NHL had, and were you really a sport if you were not on ESPN?
Right, I remember that. I remember that argument. I remember it very well.
Yeah, I mean, but they had everything,
They did.
And at the time, like the PBA bowling had better ratings, and it was just not good. And I remember Gary Bettman said to me that I was wrong about that. That the relationship. Was not good. And at the end, I think basically ESPN pushed the NHL away. They wanted to have some kind of crazy deal tied to performance as opposed to guarantee, as I recall. I'm not positive.
Yeah, because what happened was, I remember very well because I remember writing about it at the time. And this is what I heard about the situation, at least, was that this is just, we were coming out of the year off, and ESPN felt like they had all the power in the world because the NHL hadn't been around for an entire year. So ESPN was going into the negotiations in a really strong way, and and they threw an offer that was exactly like you said, incentive laden, crazy, and it was really almost like the NHL was paying to be on ESPN. That's how it was described to me.
Yeah,
basically, because ESPN felt that powerful, like we are the only game in town, and the NHL, having just come out of the lockout. It was one of Bettman's riskier moves because you could easily argue, well, yeah, maybe we had to pay to be on ESPN because we just came out of a lockout and we haven't been around. And
Yeah, that's right, and that's kind of what the position I took. And as it turned out, obviously, getting the NHL on NBC has been just a terrific move. I was witness at the Hall of Fame of someone approaching Gary Bettman and thanking him for getting the NHL on NBC, because he just said, now he knows when the games are going to be on. He follows the sport on a national basis, so it's worked out. Now, saying all that, I think this is really a fun thing for the league, because I think, now it's all NBC in America and the way they cover things. So it's all Roenick, all Milbury, all of Doc Emmerich, all that old Chuck, who are all terrific guys, and I enjoy their coverage. But now we get some unique perspective. We'll get Steve Levy back in it probably, and we'll see Barry Melrose, and there'll be some different guys that.
Tom Buccigross, Buccigross.
Yeah, for sure. Another good hockey guy. So I think it'll be fun for us to get a different perspective, and it is a different event. I'm not going to be happy not to have Doc Emmerich, calling some games, but because he's a good friend of mine, and I think he's just a great, announcer, broadcaster. But I think this is good. I think it'll be fun, and it'll be unique. And I think, didn't they do the 2004 World Cup right before the lockout? Yeah, I think they did. So, it'll be fun, and I think the NBC has enough going that they're not losing any sleep over this. So.
Yeah, I think even NBC could it's probably even good for NBC at the end of the day. I really feel like just getting it just gets hockey to a different group of people, a slightly different group of people. Those who like to watch poker.
Well, the point I was making, it being right after the Olympics, is that you're going to have the entire NBC sports division over in Brazil, and they're probably if it had gone to NBC, how much energy were they going to devote to the World Cup of Hockey after all their operations were in South America for the month leading up to, and then the 2 weeks of the Olympic Games. So it makes more sense for ESPN to get it, and hopefully they will treat it with the equal enthusiasm that they did with the World Cup of Soccer. Although that's we know that that's a historic event every 4 years. But if they give the World Cup of Hockey the kind of play that they give the NBA, and if you use the NBA and the NHL the way they treated those two leagues in comparison when they had the contracts. I mean, the NBA is usually the first thing that gets covered on an NBA night. They go to the highlights right away at the beginning of SportsCenter, and I cannot remember a time, unless it was the Stanley Cup Final, that they went to the highlights of hockey at the beginning of a show.
Oh yeah, you don't see it. You don't see it at all. And Kevin, to your point, I mean, even though it worked out well for the NHL, I mean, at the time that you wrote that story, I think you were probably pretty much right. I mean, what happened here, I mean, really how this all played out, when you think about it, is the NHL took a gamble and went to the Outdoor Living Network, right? They went to OLN instead of ESPN, which really was, like I wrote in my blog today, the first time you could see hockey, sandwiched between like people killing animals. And then that went, and then the Outdoor Living Network, I mean, because that really was just literally, that was not a great place for the NHL to be. I mean, they had a bunch of problems with the Outdoor Living Network. I mean, they really got that network on a lot of cables. They were better for the Outdoor Living Network than the Outdoor Living Network was for them, because they got OLN onto a bunch of cable outlets, and then of course OLN split into, Killing Animals, OLN, and then hockey, which became Versus, right. Which was, and then Versus eventually, merges into Comcast, and all that sort of happens, Comcast NBC and Comcast Sportsnet, and that, so they really kind of got a little lucky on it too, like the way it all fell down.
Yeah, they did, and the new NBC Sports Network needed programming,
right.
Hockey can give you a lot of nights.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a good deal for both, because they have treated the NHL terrifically in terms of giving them, standardized nights, and doing all of the playoff games, which is, to me, one of the biggest things that's ever happened. You can see every game now, and so it's been good. I think you have to commend. Regardless of whether he was lucky or figured it all out, it's worked out for Bettman. It's been a really good deal, for them.
For sure. And now moving forward, you really also you have to realize that competition. If ESPN does become become a company that wants to have hockey, if this succeeds for them, and I remember talking to Butchergrass and when the first playoffs, that ESPN came around, and he said there were a lot of people who were really bummed out about it, at ESPN. They were like, this is a big thing for us. The playoffs have been fun for them for a long time. If this turns out to be competition is just great for everybody. It's great for the fans. It's great for it makes for better programming, better. You'll see it forces NBC to be better. Yeah, it forces ESPN to be better.
But the one thing, Ak, and the one thing I'm surprised that the NHL hasn't done, if you look at the other three sports, I mean, the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball have all spread out their programming to multiple networks. The NFL is on NBC, ESPN, and CBS, Fox. Right. Basketball is on TNT and ABC. Major League Baseball is, it's on Fox and TNT during the playoffs. I mean, so the NHL has limited itself to NBC and NBC Sports Network, and maybe there's an opportunity there to have a Sunday night game on ESPN like after the football season is over with, or something like something where they can.
They tried that, I think, shortly after the lockout. There was like a plan to do that, and it never came to fruition, if I remember right. There was going to be an ESPN thing.
Yeah, and again, I think you have to look at it in terms of the evolutionary scale where the NHL are in their development, as opposed to it's a major step, and we're not that far from when it started to get all the playoff games on. So right. I think ultimately that'll come. I mean, I did have a conversation with Gary Bettman about anybody who watched the baseball playoffs and the one-game playoff, came away, and Eklund and I have discussed this with Eric Dehadchuk at length. But if you watch what happened with the baseball playoffs and the one game, basically a buy-in to try to get into the big games, I mean, that was on a different network, and it was unbelievable. And I said to Gary Bettman, my question was, have you given any thought to that? And he said, no, he hadn't, because general managers are pretty consistent in their belief that the season needs to matter, and if you played all that time just to get into a one-game, battle with the team below you to try to get in the the 4 rounds, that he felt that the general managers thought it devalued the regular season. Now, I sort of disagree with that.
Yeah,
I do too.
But I just think it would be an incredible, and my argument.
It still matters. You still got to get to that 9th spot.
Right, that's right. I mean, then it becomes. If you want to avoid that, then finish 6th. If
right.
If we're going to do 7 and 8, have to battle with 9 and 10, then if you don't like it, finish 6th.
Especially when we go to 32 teams, because when we go to 32 teams, you will have exactly half the teams not making the playoffs, right? So you'll have 16 and 16. So that, to me, that when we had 16 of 25 teams or whatever making the playoffs, then I got it. That was a little bit crazy. But now there's a lot of teams that don't make the playoffs.
And as I recall, Kevin, I mean, when the lockout was ongoing, one of the things that they talked about as a possibility, as something that was going to be brought in after the lockout, was that 8 through 9, having 20 teams come in. And I mean, honestly, I think that's inevitable. I agree with that. If it goes to 32 teams, you have to get more than 16 in. So maybe that's a way of expanding it a little further and giving teams a little more hope. You can't have half the league being sellers at the deadline.
Yeah, and here's to me why it will have to come in as well, because there's a continual march to try to increase revenue, because obviously players want more money and the owners want to make money, and if you do this, that's just more revenue. Those games don't exist now, and you can charge playoff prices for those games, and if Toronto's in that's a huge payoff.
I mean,
I
totally agree.
And you sell those games as separate package to whoever will take them. Maybe some FX would want these games, and they would get the NHL buy-in playoff games or whatever they're called.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great. It would be great. I mean, the only thing with that is you still have people who would be upset about, the games not being on their local network, and if they're on a network that they, certain cable, it has to be a cable station that's on everything, and that's if it's not, then you have issues. That's what always is the problem.
Yeah. No, I mean and that's fair, but But there could be. I mean, maybe it's TNT. Maybe they would want just the 4 games that we'll have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a problem anymore, because like with the NFL Network, a lot of carriers don't carry the NFL Network, but when it's a Buffalo Bills game, it's broadcast on a broadcast TV station by the cable network, so
they allow it. But the NHL has never done that. The NHL has never allowed that kind of thing.
But there's a precedent, and what I'm saying is that can be done if they go to an FX or a network that doesn't have like 100 or 90% viewership on cable networks.
Yeah, no, that's true. I agree. Let's move on to our winners of the war. Like we talked yesterday about the trade deadline a little bit, and talked about how I kind of was trying to divide it up into winners of the battle and winners of the war. Winners of the battle being teams that win short term, and winners of the war teams that win long term from the trade deadline. And the winners of the war, there were a lot of them. I thought there were a lot of teams that won long term, a lot more than normal. I felt in this draft got. For as much as we kept saying that they're never going to get first-round draft picks for people, they got first-round draft picks for people. It's incredible when you think about it. It just really happened, And I mean, to me, well, I'm going to start with Arizona, because I think Arizona is the place you got to start with this one, because I think they really won the war in this draft, in this trade deadline. I mean, getting 2 first-round draft picks for a team like that is just enormous. I mean, and they're going to suffer the rest of the year for it, and that's for sure. I mean, because they've got a ton of home games left, and they are not a good team right now. They've lost 10 in a row. But Duclair, picking up Anthony Duclair, to play, with Domi, is potentially great, and then also putting themselves into a situation where it really feels like, not that teams are tanking, but it's hard to argue against what Buffalo and Arizona did in terms of not tanking. They did. I mean, especially in Buffalo, when you trade away 2 starting goalies in 1 year, that's not easy to do.
I mean, the Edmonton Oilers didn't hurt themselves enough at the trade deadline to stay in the Jack Eichel sweepstakes. By the way, I just wrote a column on that. You have to call it the Jack Eichel sweepstakes now, because McDavid, it's still 80% chance you won't get McDavid.
Right.
Not really. It's the Jack Eichel sweepstakes, because if you get that last spot, you got an 80% chance of not getting Connor McDavid, but you have a 100% chance of getting Jack Eichel. Hence, it is the Jack Eichel sweepstakes.
I'm ready. I officially will change the name as of now. The Jack Eichel sweepstakes with a Connor McDavid surprise.
Yeah. You might get out of the box of Cracker Jacks. So. Right,
and I mean, I think it's obvious that for Arizona and Buffalo, this is a bigger deal in some ways, because Edmonton's had the first pick, a lot. I think that even though this is a really good first pick, I can't help but think that I think Edmonton's almost, and I've heard this from people in Edmonton, they're almost embarrassed at this point about getting this first pick. Like, it feels wrong to them to get another first-round pick. Not that they'll turn it away, but you know what I'm saying. This team has been, for Arizona and Buffalo, this is kind of new ground, Mike.
Let's just say this: if the top 2 picks in this draft were the equivalent of McDavid and Eichel as blue liners, Edmonton would have done as much as they could to tear down to get to number 1 or 2, because I think that's their area of need. They've used number 1 picks on Yakupov and Hall and Nugent.
I think they're afraid of getting the first 2 picks in the draft.
Well, no, in a way, and don't get me wrong, if they had the number 1 or number 2 pick, they're going to take McDavid, or they're going to take Eichel, or maybe trade down so they could pick Hanifin at 3 or a lower pick. But it might cause a little bit of a problem, because they have so many forwards of the same. And don't get me wrong, I think McDavid's a step above all those guys, but it would be another skilled forward, and just providing them another in a long line of skill forwards. It's great to have, but I think that's not where their area of need is. Whereas Buffalo and Arizona, they did an effective job of tearing down as much as they could. I mean, Arizona, they shut down Hansel, they shut down Bodker for the year. Well, they supposedly might have been able to come back late in the year, but they said they shut them down. They traded Yandel for a really good return, as you indicated. They traded Mahalik for a couple draft picks. The only thing that's there now is Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Sam Gagner. and a bunch of journeymen and Mike Smith. And with Buffalo, your goaltending tandem is Anders Lindbach and Chad Johnson. And and Gergensen is hurt, and Ennis is hurt, and they traded most everybody else. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a battle between the Coyotes and the Sabres for 30th place, and they play each other twice in March, and won't those be exciting games?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree a little bit with what Mike said, just because I don't think with what you're saying you're paying enough homage to, the difference in the type of players we have at the top. Like I don't think the Oilers gave any thought to, I mean, Eichel and McDavid. This is Ovechkin and Malkin. This is and there's so much better as prospects. Like Hanifin is a very good prospect, but you're happy and you're glad to get Hanifin. You're thrilled to get Eichel or McDavid. So I think this is just. I don't think they would have moved any more mountains if those were defensemen there. I think they would have. These players are great enough. I think it's just one of those things where they weren't in a position to do all the things that Arizona and Buffalo was able to do. They didn't have the same number of unrestricted free agents. In fact, or potential unrestricted free agents. In fact, they just had sort of Dan Petrie, the guys that they were tradable, had longer term deals. Like you looked at the roster, there was really not much they could do. And they weren't really going to trade any of their star players because it's not really logical to do that right now. The best thing for them to do is to get whatever pick they get, third or fourth, and then get to the summer and sort out where they are.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, the Oilers only they made the move. They got the second and the conditional fifth for Petrie. And a lot of people I've talked to think that Braden Coburn's not as good as Jeff Petrie, but got more back than Petrie. Could Edmonton have done better than this? I mean, that's the question. And I guess Petrie was so up and down, Kevin. Huh? It was just one of those things.
Well, I mean, he was very good late, but I mean, I think we talked about this the other day, or maybe it was on a different podcast, the one I did about the Red Wings. But Petrie's his problem they had was that most teams that were interested in Petrie saw him as Plan B,
right.
not Plan A, and some of the teams just saw him as kind of an average or above average, player. They didn't see him like a difference maker like Sekera. There were several teams that thought, okay, if we can get Sekera, he'll really help us. He'll be the transition guy we really need. And it was just a difference in perspective. I did talk to one GM, and I won't say which one, but who had no interest in Petrie, just didn't like him as a player.
Yeah, and I've heard that too, Mike.
The defensemen who went for ones were Sekera and Franzen, and the only reason I think Franzen got Coburn. I'm sorry, and Coburn, but Franzen, the Leafs had to throw in Santorelli to get the one. So truly, Sekera was the only one in this market that got the one on his own. I mean, even Coburn. I mean, they had to. I mean, I said Coburn was the one who got the most. It was
Coburn got the most. I think got the most return. He was the biggest return.
That's why I thought that one was the most ridiculous, because I think like I said, I think Coburn is a good defenseman, but I just don't think he's worth that kind of price.
Right. I mean, so the Flyers are another team that I think that we need to talk about as far as the teams who won the war here. I honestly think, and even though. And they did so even though they're in the middle of a playoff hunt still, and they gave away two players, one in Kimmo Timonen, who this is his last year, and he wanted a chance at the Cup, and they got for him a second and a conditional pick that could turn into a second if he plays enough games and Chicago goes far enough in the playoffs. So almost 2 seconds for potentially 2 seconds, and then a first and a third and Gudas for Coburn. That's a lot. I mean, the Flyers did well in winning the war in my battle. I think. Hextall did a good job. He got a lot back for what he gave up. The one thing I will say is, he didn't address any needs, but I think he basically just said, okay, we're looking towards the future. He's really looking towards building with draft picks. It's definitely obvious now that he's come from the King situation. He wants to build from within. He wants to bring that whole thing. It's something that we haven't seen in Philadelphia because really there are very few. If you go before the Carter and Richards era, so Carter, Richards, Giroux, those were all Flyers draft picks. You go back, there were a lot of years where none of the Flyers draft picks made the team. There were tons of years where they literally built their team from nothing but signing free agents, and that's how they did it.
Well, I mean, the harsh reality for the big market teams is that free agency is dead. I mean, in terms of impact moves, free agency is dead. These teams have to put their money, put their effort and time into scouting and into drafting well because they can hold on to these players for up to 7 years. If you draft an 18-year-old kid and he spends a year in junior and a year in the AHL, he comes up at age 20, you can keep him until age 27 under control. That's the way you have to go now. I mean, Toronto has learned that lesson, and that's the direction they're going into. And Ron Hextall, from his experience as an assistant GM with the Kings, and now what he's doing in Philadelphia, clearly is going that direction as well. And I think that's a smart way to do it.
I want a bumper sticker that says that free agency is dead. So
strike your tongues. We need free agency here at HockeyBuzz.com.
Well, I like Mike's point there because I know what he's saying. It's not as valuable as it once was because the market is so limited. But I mean, those of us who do cover the free agency signing day, I mean, it's still huge.
It's enormous.
But it's not as big as it used to be. There used to be more players, more competition. Now everybody, I mean, it hasn't worked out the way everybody said it would going in after the salary cap was introduced. There are just not as many players. Teams keep and retain their top players and even their mediocre players. So there's just not much in it. So Mike's absolutely right. It's just not as you can't build through free agency. It's impossible.
See, I'm going to argue with this thing. I'm going to disagree with both of you for a second. I honestly think that free agency is thriving more than it's ever thrived before. Well, what's different is the big names are not free agents. But we are seeing more free agents every year go to different teams than we ever had before. We're seeing more players signed on July 1st than we used to see. We're seeing lots of players who are mid-range, second, third, and fourth liners, of course. And the big names, yes, the big names aren't making it a free agency. I agree with that because they're getting tied up. And we used to see big name free agents. Well, but we also are still in the early stages of this whole concept of, guys are free agents at 27 and that they can only be tied up for 7 or 8 years. We're starting to see like UFAs, 27 and 28-year-old pending UFAs more and more all the time. That is another thing that's starting to happen where we didn't used to see that as much. So I think there's something to that too, Mike.
You could see a 26-year-old UFA in Ryan O'Reilly hit the market next year,
right?
Or Steven Stamkos hit if he wants to, which I don't think it's going to end up happening. And to your point, yes, I mean there's more movement, but the impact free agent is no longer there. I mean, look at last year and look what's going to happen this year. Last year you had Brooks Orpik, who is a fine defenseman, Matt Niskanen, who is a good, offensive defenseman, signed for 7 years for more than $5 million. That is not cost effective for those guys. They are good players. They are going to help the Capitals, but the Capitals down the line, 2 or 3 years, are going to regret those signings possibly because they're going to be paying too much. And the thing is that for Cody Franzen, possibly for Mike Green, for Sekera, if Sekera doesn't re-sign with the Kings, that kind of money is going to be spent on those players. And the teams that sign them, they're not getting bang for the buck for those players. It's just too much for those guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, do you agree, Kevin?
No, well, I don't. The problem is people never take into account the continued growth of the cap.
Yeah.
We're probably 2 years away from an $80 million cap.
Yeah.
And then, a $5 million player really isn't going to be all that significant. If you have 7 players on your team that are going to be in the $700 to $1 million range, then you're talking 16 players for $73 million. If you do the math, that's over $4 million per player. So a $5 million player really isn't all that significant. But I think, to me, my only point in all this is that the idea that you can change the direction of your team through free agency is dead, because you don't have the one star player that you can bring in. Now, if you're close and you need a grinder, or you need a right-hand shot defenseman, or you need something, you can find that guy, because there are guys that are out there. But the cupboard just isn't as significant as it used to be. If you need to fill these needs, and so I think there's a far greater. I mean, GMs say this all the time now. We used to think the draft was important. Now we really think the draft is important, because that's how you have to replenish. You can't do it.
Yeah. And by extension, Kevin, I think restricted free agency and offer sheets are dead as well, because the compensation, especially for a big guy, whoever is an RFA this year who's a big player, if they offer that player, like if PK Subban had gone and somebody had signed him to an offer sheet last year and signed him for an offer sheet equivalent to what he got from the Canadians, it would have been what, 4 first-round picks or 3 first-round picks? Nobody is going to do that anymore. No one.
But people didn't used to do that very often anyway. I mean, it really was a lightning strike when it happened. It really was not something that was really part of the because, and so many GMs have told me this. It's really the problem they had with it was an exercise in futility.
Right.
Like people were going to match, and as one GM said, it's a lot of work to make an offer sheet, and you got to get the lawyers involved and everything else. And when you do it, you have very little chance of being.
Somebody told me that the Flyers spent almost $100,000 on the Shea Weber offer sheet. Like that.
Yeah, it really is, and it's time consuming. And like I remember when the Shea Weber came out, I remember talking to a GM about it. He goes, the craziest thing about that is like everybody in the world knows they're going to match that offer, except the Philadelphia Flyers and several journalists. Like, they could not afford not to re-sign, Shea Weber, and everyone was making a big deal. And I remember this quote exactly. He wouldn't do it on the record, but he said, everybody in the league, with the exception of maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs, would have to take a loan out to get that done. Like everyone was making a big deal that they had to take a loan out. He says nobody's got $25 million sitting in their savings.
Right.
Like everybody has to get. It's just the length of the loan. The Predators' loan will be longer than somebody else's loan, because they just didn't have the same deep pockets. But those offer sheets, they would happen every once in a while. But
the crazy thing about that, Kevin, is that I'm telling you that the Flyers really believed that they weren't going to match.
No, that's what I'm saying. Everybody said.
I mean, and Shea Weber, I don't think believed they were going to match. Like I honestly believe that Shea Weber, when they parted sides, and they were hugged and they were like, "This is awesome. We're really excited." I honestly believe that both sides thought that was going to happen.
Well, I could tell you that within 10 minutes of that thing going public, I knew the Predators were going to sign. I mean, I had it essentially, verified. They went through the motions that there was a meeting, and that didn't happen for another day. But everybody knew,
Yeah. Oh, I know, and it was obvious to me too. And many, I was the only writer in Philadelphia who kept saying this is not going to happen. And in Philadelphia, because most of them were local, and maybe because I'm more of a national writer or whatever, I kept saying there's no way that they. But everybody said no, they can't afford it. The Flyers made this front loaded, so they can't afford it.
And in the end, I think that the Flyers did the Predators a big favor, because there's no way that Shea Weber would have signed a contract of that length with the Predators, based on what.
There's the other side of this argument. There's the other side of the Shea Weber thing. Just real quick before we go to some news, is this. The way this went down was that the Flyers got wind because the Flyers were trying to trade for him. Remember, there were talks. They were trying to make a trade for him, and whether or not that was going to happen or not, they were trying to make a trade. And then they heard that the Rangers were also trying to make a trade for him, and they heard that the Rangers had a better offer on the table. So that part of the Flyers strategy was, okay, we're gonna make this offer sheet because we're either going to get him or the Predators are going to get him, but the Rangers aren't going to get him.
Yeah, it
And that was something that I think that did play into them in the back of their minds. Like they were afraid that that the Rangers were going to trade for him, and that would have been devastating to them. So that was a big deal. That was part of it, for sure. So Josh, what do you have today?
Well, a couple things, guys. New York Islanders forward Matt Martin will have a hearing today for the kneeing incident on Dallas defenseman Trevor Daley. I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but it was pretty ugly. I'm sure he'll get a few games for that. No word of an in-person hearing, so obviously it'll be probably under 5 games.
Okay, I didn't see that one at all, though, but definitely.
It's pretty ugly. You should take a look at it.
I will.
Moving on to injury news, we talked about what happened in Florida last night with that crazy goalie situation.
We didn't really talk about it. But it was definitely something. I mean, it was my dream. I've been talking about this forever. I want this to happen. I want to see somebody else have to play goal. But
let me encapsulate it, and then Josh can tell us about the injury situation because I mean, it was okay. Roberto Luongo took a shot off the side of the neck during the first period. Florida led 1-0 after 20. Al Montoya came in to relieve him in the second period. He played the entire second. Florida was leading 2-1 after 2. Early in the third period, Montoya, the Toronto ties the game on a goal by Kadri, and Montoya got hurt on that goal. And there was a long delay because there was no backup at that point. Luongo was in street clothes at that point, and there was a scramble behind the Florida bench. Now, apparently what was going on was Rob Tallis, the goaltender coach, was going to put on the gear and possibly go in the game, but he hadn't signed the one-day emergency contract, or the league did not have proof of that, so they would not allow him to go back onto the ice. So the referees apparently told the Florida coaching staff that it had to be a player. So Derek McKenzie and Scotty Upshaw both went into the locker room, presumably to put on Luongo's pads. So that was going on, and they basically told them, you got to get this game going again. So Montoya went back in the net, injured, and continued to play. He allowed the eventual game-winning goal. And in the interim, Tallis came out in his goaltending equipment as the backup, and Luongo got dressed again and came back in for Montoya. So in the end, Tallis never came on the ice, but it looked like he was going to have to, or one of the players was going to have to.
How has this never happened in the NHL? I mean, it's just like, how with all the goalies that go down every game, and I mean, it's a rough position. How has this never happened that we've learned 2 goalies and had to have a player? Because I mean, it's never really happened, right, Kevin? I mean,
well, it's come close, and of course in the playoffs, Lester Patrick, who was a manager, went into the net because they couldn't. And the way it used to be is that you would just sign a goalie. That happened, and there'd be a goalie in the stands, and you would just sign him up.
That's why I wanted. That was my dream as a kid. Yeah, I wanted to be the guy.
Yeah, but I remember the one I remember is I can't remember the particulars, but the Washington Capitals, Brian Murray came close to dressing Gaetan Duchesne, who there were injuries, and then I've talked about this on another podcast. I then followed that up with a story. I went and asked every team who their emergency goalie was, and I remember when I asked Mike Keenan about it. He had this look on his face like, oh my God, I've never thought about that. and it really bothered him that he hadn't. And eventually he came up with Brad Marsh is what he decided that it would have been, because he said,
I remember that story because that is something that always has fascinated me forever, and I just and it's amazing. It is incredible to me that it's never happened. That it's never really. It should happen a couple times a year. I mean, based on what we say.
It used to, in the old days, guys would just fool around by putting the pads on. That's how they knew Duchesne, because Duchesne would put the pads on and practice just for the fun of it.
A lot of these guys had played goalie at some point in their lives too.
Yeah, just fooling around. So yeah, I mean, Dale Talon was quoted as saying that McKenzie was the guy that it looked like he was going to play, and then. Something got worked out. I don't know whether Tallis just got a contract signed or whatever.
Yeah, and Luongo came back in, but they lost the game. Mike, with the goals ending thing, with the goals Could they be related to the injury at all, or do you think?
Yeah, Montoya was lacking in mobility on the game-winning goal. I mean, even Peter Holland, the Leaf player who scored the goal, said if Montoya was 100%, he would have gotten across the crease. So
That's a major thing because this is a team that needed that point in a big way.
Right. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And now Josh, tell us about the injury status of those two goalies.
Back to you, Josh.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I want to bring up here with this whole thing. Florida Panthers, as you mentioned, were prepared to put in goalie Rob Tallis at the start of the third, but the ref said it had to be an active player,
right,
which was wrong, apparently. Apparently, they could have put Tallis in. But anyway, moving on.
They get it wrong and just okay. They had a contract now. How that?
As long as the NHL had proof that he was signed, that the emergency contract was signed.
Okay.
They could have put him in, and that apparently was the delay because Dale Talon was down in the hallway to the locker room, and I don't know if he had a piece of paper with him, but I think that was the hang up. They were on the headphones to Toronto for a good 10 minutes to determine what was going on, and then eventually Montoya went back into the game and was not even close to being 100%. But go on, Josh.
Now, here's the other thing, guys, and this is just me. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to it or not, but maybe the Panthers were also trying to stretch it out a little bit. I mean, with Montoya's injury or what have you, to kind of give it a little time, and I'm going to get into that in a second.
Mm-hmm. We don't know what the injury was. I mean, if it's a groin or something like that, it actually gets worse as you let time go by. So I don't know what the injury was.
Well, my point was, first of all, Dale Talon confirming James Duffy's report last night that Roberto Luongo was in a nearby hospital getting scanned when Montoya got hurt. Now, Luongo was getting his shoulder looked at Cleveland Clinic in Weston, and he raced back to the Panthers arena when Montoya got hurt. That's why I think maybe the Panthers, maybe kind of dragged it out a little bit because they wanted to get Luongo back.
Anybody who's ever tried to get out of an emergency room once you're there knows how difficult that can be, too.
Yeah. Now, Derek McKenzie said he was fully dressed in goalie gear, save for chest protector when Montoya returned. McKenzie says only goalie experience was goofing around during the lockout, said he would do it to help the team. Now, Dan Ellis will be in net for the Panthers versus Stars Thursday, and it's on the 1-year anniversary of him coming to Florida from Dallas for Tim Thomas.
Right.
Now, Luongo was getting a CT scan on his shoulder and collarbone, so it was not an MRI. Other stuff here with what's going on. Luongo.
Were they using a contrast agent or not? What do we know?
Yeah, I'm all over the place with that. I apologize. Now, Luongo, where was it here? Crap, I lost it. There it is. Okay, I got it. No problem. Now, Luongo is getting more imaging done. He's meeting with the ortho doctor for diagnosis on an apparent shoulder injury. Al Montoya is likely out for weeks. Now, according to Bob McKenzie, if Luongo's prognosis is not good, Florida GM Dale Talon may trade for a goalie. Now, trades are permitted post-deadline, but players are not playoff eligible, so that's something to keep an eye on, guys.
Ah, interesting. Wow. So we're gonna have the post.
Tim Murray will trade him Anders Limbach, no problem.
Or that backup from Columbus. Yeah, but
Markstrom. Can we see Markstrom back in Florida?
Well, all this means one thing, of course. Next Wednesday is the post-trade deadline show. The HockeyBuzz.com, where we will then talk about the trades that will occur between now and the end of the year. Non-playoff eligible.
Now, also, just so you guys know, Sidney Crosby weighed in on the whole two-goalie situation because everyone's panicking, wondering if they should bring in a third goalie so this situation doesn't happen again. Well, Crosby said if both goalies ever get hurt, I would love to get my number called.
I think every player would. I mean, are you kidding? I mean, I think every player. I know Kimmo Timonen was this for the Flyers last couple of years, and every player would love to have their shot at this. Yeah, Kevin, don't you think so? I mean, any player would be like this.
There's a lot of players who would, just enjoy the challenge of it all for sure. I mean, they're professional athletes. They live for that kind of.
Yeah, and one shot that people say I was the goalie who came in and played. That'd be something. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, Josh. Anything else? We good?
Yes, other injury news. Henrik Zetterberg has been cleared to play. He will be in the Red Wings lineup centering a line of Eric Cole and Justin Abelkader tonight, so that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, Eric Cole. I'm looking forward to seeing him as a Red Wing. I like Eric Cole.
I'll be there tonight doing a story on it. So
Excellent. Eric Cole's a great guy. And a Hockey Buzz reader.
One final one, guys. A couple of days after signing his extension, Ducks defenseman Tim Jackman, lower body injury, will be out 4 to 6 weeks. Sorry, he's not a defenseman. Out 4 to 6 weeks, and he sustained the injury Sunday at Dallas. I always confused Tim Jackman with Barrett Jackman, so I apologize.
Hugh Jackman. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't think of that. But 4 to 6 weeks after signing that long extension, so that definitely hurts for the Ducks. He's a good team guy, good locker room guy.
For sure.
And just to further the story from Josh, Rob Tallis via Twitter acknowledges, next March the 3rd, I will be nowhere near a hockey rink.
Funny. All right, Josh.
The last time he played was February 18th, 2001 was the last time he was in net?
Yes, indeed.
Ready our draft simulator, Eck?
Ready for the draft simulator, indeed. Here we go. Oh, Lord. Well, this is for those of you who said we wouldn't talk about them.
Columbus? Yeah, Mike's going to have all the sound effects go off right now.
Alexa, play Tragically Hip Fireworks.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
You mean Katy Perry
We'll
fireworks?
see you later. Have a good day. And thanks for joining us on HockeyBuzzCast. Remember, we'll be back again tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. We'll be back with tomorrow's Thursday. Damn it. We'll be back tomorrow. In a blizzard here in the Northeast. Have a good night.
It was back in 72.